Man, like I've said a few times, is that the more and more I read Revelations and the more I listen to people and read other books, man, I don't want to use the word it's confusing, but there is definitely some different, and if we get to it, we'll be in Revelation chapter 13 to answer your guys' question. And it is definitely to a point where um, you got to kind of, again, I want to back up and say this, that when it all comes down to it, I love Dan, how I wish he was here because I want to argue with him this evening. And it comes down to the pan theory. It's all going to pan out at the end, instead of pre-trib, mid, whatever, all that different stuff. It's all going to pan out in the end, and that's true. And I think that, as soon as we get to heaven, wherever the rapture is in the midst of all of this, I think that we're definitely going to, I don't even know if we'll think about it anymore. I don't even think we'll go, oh, the book of Revelation, I wonder what's going to happen. I don't even think we're going to see our loved ones, man. I'm going to see Nate and my mom and Jesus, and Revelations is the last thing on my mind.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So it's not going to be something that's there that we're going to worry about once we get up to heaven. But the more and more I read, so Dan, over the last couple weeks, he gave me a couple different things. He said, Mark, you need to read Matthew chapter 2. He goes, it sounds a lot like Revelations chapter 12. So I'll let you read that on your own time if you want to. So Matthew 2, Revelations 12, a little comparison, which I get. And he's talking about how he went and hid for several years. You remember in chapter 12, and we were talking about all that. Well, if you go to Matthew chapter 2, just one scenario is when Jesus is born, and what does an angel come and tell Joseph to do? To leave. So he's comparing that. I understand I believe what Dan's saying. I can't put words in his mouth because he's not here this evening. But I think what he's saying is that when they went and hid Jesus, because that was, because ultimately, yes, we are the church, the body, but ultimately Jesus, our Savior, is the church or the head of the church, and went and hid for a period of time. And then what happened is there was another period where they said, okay, now you need to move again. So there was twice that Mary and Joseph and Jesus moved when he was still young in order to escape being killed at two different points. And so he kind of compares those two with Matthew chapter, Revelation 12 and Matthew chapter 12. So you can read that on your own time. So the other thing he said was to listen to Greg Laurie, and he goes through Revelations in 45 minutes. Wow. Now, number one, you can't go through Revelations in 45 minutes. I guarantee you that right now. The second thing is that he did write a book. I don't think I'm going to buy it and read it, but he wrote a book about Revelations. It's a 400-page commentary about the book of Revelation. What he believes that Revelation's about, what it stands for, what things mean. So, anyway, today I actually watched it was an hour show, and I actually watched it, and he had a lot more stuff in there than just Revelation. He preached as he went along, had an altar call at the end and stuff like that, which was awesome. But it wasn't just the book of Revelations. And he started off in chapter 1 and kind of hit chapter 2, and then he clumped up 1 through 3 all together, talking about the churches. He jumped into 4 for a brief moment. He did use, and I'm kind of repeating here a little bit, but he did use when Jesus said, or when God said to John, come on up here, he uses that as the rapture of the church. Now, I don't believe that that's the rapture of the church. I believe that the rapture of the church happens in chapter 7, where the earth, where the sun turns like blood, the moon loses color, stars fall from the sky, there's an earthquake, because then John says there's a great multitude that's there. But he uses that when he says, come on up here, he uses that because, Mike and I were talking about this before, because at that point, John says, where did all these people come from? Every tribe, every language, every place. Where did they all come from? So in other words, that means that when seal number 1 was broken, because this is seal number 6, when seal number 1 was broken, those people weren't there. Because otherwise he would have said, hey, there's a whole bunch of people here, right? I mean, because he said there was a whole bunch of people here over on number 6, so why wouldn't he say it over here? So, in listening to that, and he goes through, and then he skips to like chapter 12, and then he skips over all the seals, he skips over the trumpets, the bowls of wrath, he skips all the way to chapter 12, and then he goes from 12, he kind of briefly hits a couple little tidbits, and then he jumps to like chapter 20. Well, yeah, no wonder I can go through Revelations in 45 minutes too if I only hit 3 chapters out of it. I mean, yeah, we could do that too. And I'm not blaming the guy or whatever, but I totally disagree with what the guy said. And that's why I'm not going to read his book and spend the money on it. I disagree with him, but again, I want to back up and say this, it doesn't really matter.
No, right.
It does not matter about their
Right.
salvation, so I'm not going to get it. But what I did come to the conclusion was this, is that in the book of Revelations, and this is where I wish Dan was here because I wanted to argue with him. In the book of Revelation, and you guys can argue with me too if you want to. I love arguing, I know, but anyway, I love debating. This don't call it arguing, this is called debating. I love debating and knowing that I'm right. But anyway, so what I've come down to is this, is that I've come down to 3 points, and I wrote them down here real quick. That the whole book of Revelation, in my opinion, again, this is going to be my opinion, is based upon 3 things of your foundation that has to be in order for the whole book to work, or how the book works, or the order that it's in. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I'm saying it right. The first one is that when and what is the abomination of desolation? That is a key point in the midst of all of this, is that if you don't believe when the abomination of desolation is, or when it took place, or when it happened, then the thing is that it's kind of then you can take the Bible, you can take the chapters and move them around. So my dad's thought and theory is that, and so again, you could do this with anything. So again, in the span of it, it doesn't really matter. When we get to heaven, it's not going to really matter. I actually found an article why historians believe Titus sacrificed a pig on inside the altar in the temple on AD 70. Now, some of them believe that this is the abomination of desolation, is when Titus sacrificed a pig on the altar. Well, I actually found out, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because it is very interesting. If you're interested, we can make copies back there and you can take a copy home and read it yourself. His dad earlier fought in 66 and 67 AD Israel. And then, I think he passed away, if I'm not mistaken, but Titus, his son, took over. And in 70 AD, he destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. Now, the Romans had their own religion and sacrifices that they did. And this is a word, oh man, I have never ever heard this word in my entire life. It's called Suventerio. I'll spell it for you. Suvetauria. Yeah, I've never even heard this word before in my entire life. This was a, huh?
Is it an English word?
No, it is not an English word. So this is a word, and as I read this and I watched a little bit on what it was about, and as I went through this was a sacrifice that was made. And Mike, if you can, well, can we pull up a YouTube thing? It's like 1 minute long. I'll spell it again to you whenever you're ready. And so what it is a sacrifice. So the Su stands for pig. The Vetra stands for a sheep, if I'm not mistaken. And then Teria stands for a bull. And what they would do is that they would take these 3 animals and they would walk them around the property 3 times. And then they would take them and they would sacrifice all 3 in the place, and this was supposed to purify the land. Now, this was a Roman custom, not Israel. So this is not a Jewish custom. This is a Roman custom after they destroyed it. So here we go, Mike. You're going to type in S. I know it's a weird. UOVETAURILIA.
I already have it. It says that it's one of the most sacred and traditional rites of Roman religion, and it's a sheep in a bowl, and it's Latin.
Just hit that top one up there, Mike. It's just a minute and whatever, a few seconds after the commercial goes. And they actually pronounce the word, so that's the other reason why I wanted to.
Yeah, because I didn't even attempt it. I just looked at it.
And it takes a second for the sound to come on, Mike. So hold on, it's kind of weird.
Suovetorilia is a traditional triple sacrifice to the god Mars
Suovetorilia.
to purify land,
Vervilia.
where a pig, sheep, and bull were sacrificed, as you can see in this relief. There aren't too many compound words in Latin, but this is one of them. Pig is sus, sheep is ovis, and bull is taurus. The animals were first led around the fields 3 times, and then a sacrifice was made with the thought that the land would be cleansed from past evil and also protected from future evil. Since this offering was made to the god Mars, who originally was an agricultural god of the fields, which makes the purification of the land bit make sense, it eventually began to be used to bless armies before military campaigns. And after the capital was burned down in 69 AD during the struggles between the competing successors of Nero, Vespasian used the Suovetorilia to purify the ground before he constructed the temple to the Capitoline Triad, a triple sacrifice for a triple deity. I'm reminded of the turducken, and although we have no credible evidence that the pig was placed inside of the sheep and inside of the bull while it was cooked, Romans would eat their sacrificial animals after sacrifice.
So anyway, that's it. So that's why they believe that this took place. Now, and so like this is why it's so important. In the belief that my dad has, is that in order for any of the seals to be broken or opened, 2 things had to take place. Number 1, and we talked about this before, was someone had to become worthy enough to break the seals. And you can read that in, I think it's Revelation chapter 4. And even the angels are saying, who's worthy enough to do this? And so Jesus is the one. So the only way he became worthy enough was to walk upon this earth sinless, die on the cross, and rise again. Well, Jesus has already died and rose again, so that means that the seals could be opened. The other thing is that, and my dad believes that this is in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15, it says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken about through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand. And then jumping down to number 21, for then there will be a great tribulation. So after the abomination of desolation, then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will. So the thing is that if the abomination of desolation has to take place, and someone worthy enough to open up the seals, which would make sense because this happened in 70 AD, which was 40 years after Jesus died and rose again. We always think that, I'm not going to get into all the dates and, AD and BC and all that. But anyway, it's exactly 40 years after that Jesus died and rose again is when Titus came in. And we know in the book in the Bible, 40 stands a time of testing. The children walked in the wilderness for 40 years.
Yeah.
It rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah.
It's a time of testing. So if this period of time from Jesus dying and rising again, 40 days, Titus comes in, destroys it, and then they sacrifice not only a pig, but a sheep and a goat, but they sacrifice a sow on the temple, on the altar. That would be an abomination of desolation.
Yeah.
And they say, hold on. I want to make sure. Daniel chapter 9 verse 27, it says this, and he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to the sacrifice and the grain offering. The whole wing of abomination will come, one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, the one that is decreed to be poured out on the one that makes desolate. Well, definitely that took place. Daniel 11:31, force from him will arise, desecrate the sanctuary fortress, and do away with the regular sacrifice, and they will set up an abomination of desolation. So he did away with the sacrifice. Now, and again, I'm going to say something else too. From the time that the regular sacrifice, this is Daniel 12:11, it says, from the time of the regular sacrifice of the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1,290 days. And it tells that we see that when you, in the book of Revelations, that when you see the abomination of desolation, to run for the hillside. Now when Titus came in, they definitely ran for the hillside and they got out of there. They took off. So this is the key point, is that if the abomination of desolation has to take place in order for the seals to be open and someone worthy enough, that means the seals can start. Listening to Greg Lowry, he says we're not even in seal number 1 yet, because that's the Antichrist. Now I believe that that's Christ. He believes that that's the Antichrist, which to me is the old Assemblies of God. That's the way they believe. The way I grew up is the white horse is the Antichrist, and that the person that rides on it. And so we see this here. But if you go to and back into Revelations, you can see at different points where it talks about abomination of desolation in the middle of the week. So if the abomination of desolation took place over here, that means that, and if the abomination of desolation has to take place before you can open up the very first seal, and it happens way over here in chapter 13 in the book of Revelation, then how did the seals even become open yet? See why I'm saying this is a crucial point in the book of Revelation of the way that it's laid out, is what is the abomination? Is it when the Antichrist comes and he sacrifices and on there, and then it says to run for the hills? Now I do believe that there are going to be Christians here at this time, that there is going to be people, because he even talks about that there's a period of time where they're released to slaughter Christians again in the book of Revelation chapter 13, if we get there tonight. But it depends on what it is. Is it Titus or is it the Antichrist? And that's a question that needs to be determined. Now these are foundations to me that has to be determined to do the line work of the book of Revelations, to see where it's at and where it's going and where it's taking place. Because if it doesn't, if we put it at later, and it has to happen, because it says as soon after, once again, I'm going back to Matthew 21, it says, for there will be a great tribulation. So again, the Daniel the prophet and those who in Judea must flee to the mountains. This, I'm going back to Matthew 24:15 and 16. I'm going to just read down to 21. So they fled. So when they fled to the mountains, when Titus came, because they didn't want to be killed. So they took off and left. Whoever is on the housetop must go down and get the things out that they are in the house. So you got to get your stuff. Whomever is in the field must not turn back to get his coat. So in other words, when you you see your enemy and you're out in the field, you just don't go back home to go, oh man, I need to get my jacket. Oh, I forgot my cell phone. I need to go back and get it. Type of thing. But woe to those who are pregnant, to those who are nursing babies of that day, because they kill everybody. But pray that you fight will not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. Then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, or even will. Now, this brings me into the next couple points. Is that, and I've been practicing the word, chronological. Chronological. There we go. If you don't believe, you have to come to the standpoint, is the book of Revelation chronological or is it not? Now again, we talked about overlapping, where things are happening at the same time. I'm all about that. I get that and I understand that, because you can only write about one thing at a time. So I totally get that. So if they're chronological, They don't talk about the abomination of desolation again or the Antichrist until chapter 13. But what happens before chapter 13? Seal 1 through 6, great multitude. Seal 7 is the 7 trumpets. Trumpet 7 is the 7 bowls of wrath. Then we go into 12, 13. Then all of a sudden the Antichrist comes on the scene. So you see how, if it's chronological, how does that work? How do we go from here and then go over here again? And then start and then catch back up to where we're at? You know, if it all goes chronological in the right order, then that means the Antichrist comes on the scene after the seals, after the after the trumpets, and after the bowls of wrath. Then he comes onto the scene. If we believe what we read here, and we believe it's in the perfect order. So if that's the abomination of desolation, and it has to happen before a seal can be broken, then we have to jump all the way back to chapter 4 or 5 and start breaking the seals at that time. So that's the base. I'm saying you have to determine if this is all in the chronological order, the book of Revelations. And so again, I go from the standpoint of God is a God of order.
Mm-hmm.
He's not a God of, oh, let's back up and go back to chapter 4. You remember that part I gave to you at the beginning of the letter? We're jumping back to there now. He's not, to me, he's not a God of confusion like that. And so if we go in order, then how does that take place? Unless the tightest thing was the abomination of desolation. And I'm not saying it is, because it could be the Antichrist. And the same thing could be here. When you see the Antichrist, run for the hilltops. When you're in the field, don't go back. Woe to those that are pregnant, because you're going to be killed. But the rapture of the church has already taken place. Back to me in the sixth seal. So it's already taken place compared to where the Antichrist is. So you wouldn't say woe to the person that's pregnant, because that's already happened, unless they're going to be murdered. And they're going to be killed, which we're going to read here where they can go and slaughter people. So I mean, and that's what I'm saying. That has to be a base of either you believe it's this, or you believe it's over here, in order to make your thought and theory work. And you have to come to the conclusion, is it chronological or is it not? The other thing that I've found out is this, is the seal, because in reading this, listening and reading and everything that I've been doing, like I said, it becomes not, to a certain extent, a little confusing. Hold on, I have to point.
Seems like most of the Bible is in chronological order, though.
Well, if you go, you can actually buy a chronological Bible. So, and I have one somewhere in all my books and stuff. And actually, when you do that, now the Gospels are not going to be so much in different orders, but definitely the Old Testament is in different order. Where Paul went to, not Paul, excuse me, where the prophets and different things happen, and some of the books are flip-flop and they are different, though that it doesn't change anything, it just makes the timeline a little bit better, and it makes it really hard to find chapters or books in the Bible because they're not in the spot that they're supposed to be that you learned since you're a little kid. So anyway, it does make it a little difficult in that sense, but they do have a chronological Bible that you can buy that is supposed to be in the correct timeline order.
Got it.
So it is out there.
My thought was,
Yeah, go ahead.
when John was seeing all this and was being told all this,
Yes.
and my thought is, this is what's going to happen when the devil, the Antichrist, shows up.
Mm-hmm.
All this is going to happen. So this is what's going to happen.
From
And
seal
then
number 1?
Yeah, all the way through. This is what's going to happen when the Antichrist comes. And
So
so you
when
get
the
the Antichrist, and then that's what's going to happen.
So this would kind of tie, I think, if I understand what you're saying, this is going to be my next question that you have to ask yourself. How many times have we read in the last little bit, 3.5 years, 1,290 days, time and a half, which is 3.5 years, the 2 witnesses, how they were on the earth for 3.5 years, right? So this is the next question, and I was talking to Mike at this, that you have to ask yourself, and you have to determine. Now you have to also throw into the mix of this Daniel with the 70th week. Because when I grew up, and the way that I understood it, is the 7 seals all happened, each seal was 1 year. That's the way that I was taught growing up, and that's the 7-week period, the 7 seals. Now the question you have to ask yourself is this: is the Great Tribulation, from the time the first seal is broke to the time that basically Jesus comes back, is that all the Great Tribulation all together in one lump sum? Because when they do it, because the Bible says, take courage, for you in this world you will have tribulation, but take courage, for I have overcome this world. We find that out in Matthew.
Yeah.
So the Bible says we're going to have tribulation. Now you have to determine, well, what is tribulation? Is tribulation like what we think? Or is tribulation, because right now, when there was no toilet paper on the Walmart or nowhere in Payson to be found, I got to be honest with you, that was a little bit of tribulation. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was a little bit, even was Pam when you mentioned it, if it's on the shelf. Now for us, that would be tribulation. To the person that lives in Africa, they're like, toilet paper, I use leaf. Right? I mean, that's not tribulation to them. The Bible never says tribulation is going to be the same all over the world. They're, in their mind, I mean, if we were to go to their third world country, we would be like, you guys are in tribulation right now. You guys, I mean, what in the world are you doing? So there's a lot of, the more and more I read, the more and more. So you have to determine, is the tribulation, the Great Tribulation, is it, because it says, then there will be a great, again, Matthew 24:21, and there will be a great tribulation such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now. Now, in my mind, I'll just share my mind, is that I don't view all of this as the Great Tribulation. I view this as the tribulation, the first 7 seals, or the first 6 seals, and then the 7th seal, in my mind, starts the Great Tribulation, or the wrath of God. Because the Bible clearly says over and over again that we were not designed for the wrath of God. But it never said that we wouldn't have tribulation.
Right.
So you have to ask yourself the question, is the seals, trumpets, bowls, and then is all, if that is the Great Tribulation, all of them, then how does all that happen in 1 week? Because if we go back to Daniel and say the 70th week that God told Daniel to shut up, that you're not going to understand it, so close the book, you can't read the 70th week. If that is the tribulation, that means the seals, trumpets, and bowls all happen in 7 years. If we take 1 day as a year, like the Bible says, so if we take 1 day as a year, that means all of them have to happen, and even the Antichrist has to come on the scene, and everything. And then if we even if we break this down even more, if you're saying your thought is theory is correct, it says that in the middle of the wait, he breaks the covenant. 3.5 years. So if he breaks the covenant, that means really the seals, the trumpets, and the bowls, if it's all chronological. Thank you guys, I said it enough, I got it. If that happens, then that means that all that stuff would have to happen in the first 3.5 years, because then he's going to come on the scene, but then he breaks the covenant, and then he becomes the bad person in the last 3.5 years. And again, how many times have we seen 3.5 years, time and time again? Then the question is those 3.5 years lapped on top of each other, or 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, 1290, time and time again, or is it all stacked on top of each other? So you're saying, Dennis, and again, Dan's not here, so I guess you're the debating person tonight. You're the debating person. That you're saying then that seals, trumpets, bowls, witnesses, Antichrist, murdering of the people, all happen within 7 years.
Yeah.
But there's even times where it says, and nothing took place for 6 months. We read that.
Mm-hmm.
There was peace for like 6 months. They weren't allowed to do anything for 6 months. So there was a 6-month period in there that nothing was to take place. So how do we jam all of this into 7 years? Huh?
Well, it's actually 6.5 years if you take the 6 months off.
Yeah, and I think there's another place. So I mean, I'm not 100% sure of the other one. So that would be 6 years total. And everything has to be jammed into that. If you say the 70th week in Daniel is the Great Tribulation, and if the Great Tribulation is from the time the Antichrist gets on the scene to the first seal being broken to the Antichrist coming on the scene, basically until the Battle of Armageddon, if that is the Great Tribulation, all that has to take place in 7 years or less.
I read somewhere, and I can't find it right now, it's a
Then it doesn't count,
generation.
Ginger. No, go ahead.
No, I was looking for it.
How
because
long
you're
is a
talking-
generation?
It says generation.
Generation is 35 years.
Yeah, it says over generations, and I'm looking for it right now. I
A
thought it was
generation is
about-
considered 35 years.
And who came up with that?
That,
that's
you
what I-
read that years ago, you could probably look up,
that it
probably
happened
pull it
over
up on,
generations.
just look up on Google or whatever, say how long is a generation?
35 years.
But the Antichrist is only here for 3.5 years, and then he becomes the devil.
So, but where's that 3.5
How long
years?
is generation?
When-
So is that happening during the trumpets and the bowls?
Well, yeah.
25 years.
Oh, 25 years, still 25 years. What do you got? 25 years. 25 years. A generation is about 25 years.
I'm gonna-
So the thing is that you have to come up with that, is the beast and everything, because you got other beasts that are coming out of the sea.
Mm-hmm.
You got other things that are taking place here. So if you jam all that into 7 years, all I gotta say, in my opinion, is no way. There's no, if you were to take all of those 3.5 years from saying the 42 months to 1260 to time and time again, and you were to get, if I was to go back, and I didn't do it, but if I was to go add up all of those things, and I try to jam all those on top of each other, how in the world is he going to bring peace and everything to this earth during that time where the trumpets are going on and you got locusts coming out of the abyss, whether they be helicopters or the real creature that John described, doesn't matter what it is. How is he bringing peace to this earth? Because the first 3.5 years, it's peace. If you go back to seal number 1, it says he goes out to conquer the conqueror. The second one is war. Where's peace in war? Then the third seal is you got famine and pestilence. How is that peace?
Well,
No.
peace is not war, doesn't mean you can't have problems. Tribulation.
Oh, tribulation.
Yeah. You have tribulation. You may have peace,
Yeah, but it
you
says
have
he brings
tribulation.
peace to the earth. He even solves the Middle East crises.
Yeah.
It's complete peace.
But he-
There's no war, no fighting. So then you got to take out seal number 2 because that's war.
But we can still have
I
tribulation.
love debating with you. see?
I mean, there's still.
But see now, John was talking to God, and God told him 7 years,
No, he didn't
Yeah,
say
he can
7
figure
years.
out, huh?
Show me where it says 7 years.
3.5 and 3.5.
Show me where it says 7 years, though. He tells John that all this is taking place in 7 years.
Yeah.
Show it to me. I'm challenging you. Literally go home this week and come back next
Well-
Wednesday and tell me where
Well, it
he
doesn't
told
say,
John.
it says John
we
says he was told that.
He was, show it to me.
Well, then how did we get 7 years in there?
The 7 years come from Daniel, the 70th week.
Oh, no.
And we take the book of Daniel's, which there's a lot of prophecy in the book of Daniel's about the end times. And that's 100% true. I agree with that one bit, not arguing with that. But they take that 70th week and they invoke it into the book of Revelations. And because they got 7 seals, 1 week has 7 days, 7 seals. It must be 1 week. Or 7 years. That's where it comes from. It doesn't come because he says it because God says it to John, or John says, this must take place all in 7 years. It doesn't say that.
It's just their opinion.
It's their opinion that scholars have done. Now again, this is timeline and baseline that if you don't come to the conclusion of where you stand on these 3 points, the abomination of desolation, is it Titus or is it in Revelations chapter 13? And let me just go there real quick, because I mean, I want to show the other way. Revelations chapter 13, verse number 5, it says, and he was given a mouth speaking great things of blasphemy, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. So there's the 42 months again, and that's now in